Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggelhaus. As you can see, we are back on the other side of Swaggelhaus's room, which means we have another whiteboard video. Yes, that is right. A lot of you guys happen to enjoy my whiteboard video I made the other week where I talked about the philosophy of spending maybe $1,000 on a comic book investment. And I decided to do another one. Decided to do another whiteboard video for you guys here today. Another sort of what we would call, financial philosophy type of video. Of course, this is not financial advice. After all, remember, see this name right here? I got a lot of these types of books. So don't listen to me. I am some guy who randomly likes this character. So this is not financial advice. But today we have to talk about a very, very important thing in the comic book collecting hobby. And that is this idea of the Whitman Paradox. The Whitman Paradox. Now, you might be asking yourselves, Swaggelhaus, what is the Whitman Paradox? Well, if you were to hop onto Google right now and to Google Whitman Paradox, you're probably not going to find anything, because the Whitman Paradox is something that I am coining today right here on the channel. This is the very first time that anyone will have said the Whitman Paradox. In fact, I don't actually know if this is going to be a thing that sticks around, but this is going to be a thing that sticks around on my channel, because we're going to talk about this idea of Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, and how this book in particular, Avengers 48, Avengers 47, Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, is going to get us to the moon. That is right. Dane Whitman. I've been hearing a lot about him. Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, the next big thing. If I'm somebody out there who is a key collector Kevin, right? Key collector Kevin, I've been thinking about trying to go to the moon. I want to go to the moon with this particular character. What character do I want to be buying? What character do I want to invest in? Well, of course, I want to be investing in Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, because Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, is the next best thing, and he's going to be getting me to the moon very, very, very soon in the MCU. But here's the problem, right? Here's the problem, because so far we've defined the Whitman, right? But we have to talk about this idea of the paradox. What is the paradox? Well, if you guys know, obviously a paradox is two things that are opposite that can't actually simultaneously coexist, yet somehow they do. Therefore, it is a paradox. So the question is this. If Black Knight is the next best thing or the next big thing in the MCU, and I'm someone who's going to spec on the Black Knight character, and then when we get the Black Knight movie, I'm going to sell the Black Knight book for massive, massive, massive gains. The question is, if everybody is thinking that, if everybody is key collector Kevininging, thinking they're going to go to the moon and sell their Dane Whitman book at the height of the Black Knight trailer, the question is, who is going to be buying the book? Who are going to be the holders? Who in the comic book market are going to have the diamond hands, if you will, to our paradox here? Who is going to have the diamond? Well, that kind of looks like some monster hands, but diamond hands. Who are going to be the people that hold on to this book? Therefore, if everyone is planning to buy the book, to spec on the book, to sell the book for massive gains, we have what we call the Whitman Paradox, right? The Whitman Paradox, where all books are going to potentially go to the moon, yet there's going to be no actual buyers for them because everybody is going to be trying to sell their book, and therefore two things can't simultaneously exist at the same time. So in this video, we're really going to dive deep into the Whitman Paradox phenomenon and talk about how the years of the generations are really, really important to understand in order to prevent yourself from falling into the Whitman Paradox trap. Now, let me get a couple things clear. I know there's a couple people out there who are watching this video right now that are already smashing the dislike button because they themselves are massive fans of Dane Whitman, the Black Knight. I understand that both of you guys are huge fans of the Dane Whitman character. I totally get it. I'm not knocking him as a character. We all know that we all have our favorite random characters that aren't actually that popular. Again, I will just point to this name right here. So don't worry about it. I'm on your side. What I'm talking about here is the value, or the prospective value, that presumably this book is going to be able to yield for ourselves later on in the future. And not to say that this book will never have value. There will still be some hodlers in the future. But we have to just be very, very careful and manage our expectations. And we're going to have to listen to Swag right here to help us understand why this indeed is a paradox, and how the generations and the years in which books come out have a very big effect on the long-term value of the actual comic book itself. So I apologize to the two of you guys who are actual Black Knight fans, but again, this is for entertainment purposes, so try to enjoy regardless. So let us listen to Swag right here and see if he can help us understand what is going on with the Whitman paradox. So the very first thing that we have to talk about is, luckily I have the anagram of Swag to explain to us how we can understand the Whitman paradox. The first step that we have to do to understand this is we have to talk about the S right here, which the S is basically going to stand for stands. 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 What is stands? Stands is the very first step and important thing to understanding the idea behind the Whitman paradox. Now, Stan actually has a double meaning here. We're talking about Stan the man, Stan Lee, who created this thing that we love called Marvel comic books, and started off in 1961 creating some of our favorite characters. He would launch tons of titles that would go on to create some of the best superhero characters there is out there in all of comic books. And ironically, for being Stan Lee the man, he would then create a lot of Stans who would then support this character. So, we're talking about who are going to be the people that want to hold these books, who are going to be the holders, that are going to be, buying these things when we're actually speccing on them. Well, the holders are going to be the Stans that were created from these various generations. Now, I keep saying the word generations. What are you talking about, Swag? What do you mean by generations? Well, put down your hands, hold your questions. We're going to get there, okay? We're going to get there. Now we're going to talk about stands. Let's get to the next letter here, which is W, but actually we're going to write this out to be W, W, E. Or WWF, which is what I personally like to remember it by. WWE, what are you talking about? The World Wrestling Entertainment, or the World Wrestling Federation. This is a very important step to understanding the Swag system, in understanding the Whitman paradox and how we can protect ourselves from the books that we're going to be buying. Now, what does WWE have to do with any of this? What does WWE have to do with being a stand right here? Well, WWE is a very important thing to understand because it has been generational entertainment, and it is a good benchmark to evaluate the fandom that presumably will be surrounding the MCU and future generations down the line. The WWE has been a persistent storyline that has continued on throughout the generations, dating all the way back to effectively the 70s. The 80s, of course, when it got, to the point that, we all know it to be, but, it really started in the 70s when Vince McMahon took over all the territories, and it's been going on for roughly 40 years. That's effectively what the WWE, or the MCU, is eventually going to be doing as well. So WWE, what has been a product of WWE? Well, let's talk about some of the generations. Much like Silver, Bronze Age, Copper Age, Modern Age, the WWE has created a lot of generations. We have the golden era, right? We have the golden era. The golden era is when we had Hulk Hogan. We had the Ultimate Warrior. I'm not gonna write it all. Okay, you guys get the picture. Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, the Macho Man. And then later on, we had the Attitude Era, which created Stone Cold Steve Austin. It created The Rock. And then later on after that, we had sort of the next generation, which would then create characters like Batista or Randy Orton. And then the time after that, we'd have even the PG era, which would create characters like John Cena and CM Punk. And what you see with the WWE right here is that they tend to create stands in generational waves. So generational waves. Well, let's go back over here to the silver, bronze, and copper and modern. And Swaggle happens to have the dates right here, this is where it starts to get really, really key to our understanding of the swag system and understanding the Whitman paradox. So we have A right here. Now, what does A stand for? A stands for application. Application of what the hell we are talking about. So we got the stance here, we got the WWE generations. Let's talk about the application of comic books and eventually where this all ends up leading to. So we have to think about the generations as being, a generation of fans who are converted into holders of the particular comic book, right? So when you're out there and you're a young, impressionable little kid looking at all these great characters that are created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in the 1960s, you're thinking about characters like, Spider-Man, right? Everybody loves Spider-Man. You're thinking of characters like Iron Man. You're thinking of characters like Thor. You're thinking of characters like Incredible Hulk. And what ends up eventually happening is that in this generation, in this boom cycle, you create all of these stands who are very big fans of these particular characters. Now, what happens as a result of that? Well, from 1962 to 1964, Marvel Comics is really hitting their stride. They're thinking of a lot of characters that are really starting to work for them, and they're creating a lot of good characters overall. Well, eventually what happens, because it is a business, because it is a company, eventually, people start to get a little more tired of the Spider-Man characters. People start to get a little more tired of the Hulk characters. They got to try to start to create some new things, some new ideas out there in the market. But the problem is that, the business has not gone through a revolution yet. And so what they end up doing is creating characters that are basically the same thing, but a little bit almost derivative of the characters that had originally got them there. So from 1967 to 1961, what are the type of characters that are created? Well, you have characters like the Black Knight, right? You have characters like Adam Warlock, or him at the time in which he was known in this particular era. You have characters like Vision. And with all due respect to characters like Black Knight, Adam Warlock, and Vision, these characters are all sort of derivative of the Spider-Man, Iron Man, Thor, and Hulk characters, and I think the book's values are reflective of that. But then, kind of like in the WWE era, right, you have your Hulk Hogans, you have your Ultimate Warriors, eventually those guys move on, and then you have to sort of promote, your Yokozunas and things like that, and the reality is, Vision is never going to be the flagship character. Yokozuna is never really going to be the flagship character of WWE, so you have to go through sort of a revolution. You have to reinvent the wheel, and then that's where you get to like the Bronze Age right here. So then the Bronze Age comes in, and for a lot of various factors, you have a lot new creators, you have more new blood coming in, you have new ideas and things like that. So you get this kind of revolution of comic books, and then you start to create all of these new great characters. You have things like Ghost Rider, right? You got the repealing of the censorship in the Bronze Age, so you got characters like Ghost Rider. You have characters like Wolverine coming out of this era, right? You bring in Chris Claremont. Chris Claremont is creating the new X-Men and utilizing new characters like that. So again, what ends up happening, you have the new old generation, the golden era with Hulk Hogan and the Warrior. You get rid of them, you kind of go through this transition period, and then eventually you get a Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Those are the ones that really start to, blossom in this new era. But remember, what happens? Eventually, you got characters like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Those guys move away. The Rock moves away. And then you end up with characters like Triple H and The Big Show. And those characters, although are very, very cool characters, are just not going to be living up to the characters that defined that era and defined that generation. So you have characters here like Ghost Rider, Wolverine, and X-Men. And then eventually, when you get to 1976 through 1983, who are the characters that start to come in? Well, they're characters that are derivative, once again, of the generation of characters that came before them. So you have the Eternals, you have Nova, you have characters like She-Hulk that are coming out in this second wave of this new generation. I know what you guys are thinking. Nova's going to be huge. Is he? Is he? We'll see. We'll definitely see. So you kind of rinse and repeat this, right? You rinse and repeat this. We're doing application. We got Copper Age here. Who's created in the Copper Age in the golden years of the Jim Shooter era up through the Jim Lee era? Well, you have great characters like Deadpool. You got characters like Gambit. I should be using the green color here because we're talking about positive characters. You got characters like Venom, right? These are the peak Copper Age characters that come out in this era. And then you go on to 1993 to 2002, which is the second wave of the Copper Age era. And you have characters like, who even came out during this time? I don't know, Elsa Bloodstone? I know a lot of you guys are talking about Elsa Bloodstone being a big character, but I could very much make a video talking about the Elsa Bloodstone paradox because I don't actually believe that this second generation of characters that comes out in these eras actually has the huddles or the diamond hand collectors that actually enjoy their series. There's a reason that there is not an ongoing Elsa Bloodstone series, and there's a reason that there is an ongoing Deadpool series and an ongoing Venom series. Then eventually you get to modern, who are, again, some of the other characters that are created. Well, from 2005 to 2011, we got Miles Morales, right? Great character. We got the Young Avengers. A lot of people love their Young Avengers, fresh blood. This is the era 2005 to 2011 where we had Mark Millar and Bendis really doing their thing. So a lot of new blood, new ideas coming into this. So any character that was created in that bubble has a genuine fan base that actually likes to read their characters. And then again, what do we have? We have the cycle repeat itself. Then we get the derivative versions. We get characters like Jane Foster. After that, in 2013 to the present, we get characters like Ms. Marvel, and the formula is trying to repeat, right? We're trying to repeat the success from the earlier generation, but we are unable to do so because what actually happened was when these eras started, we created all of these stands within context to the new ideas that came, and looking at things like WWE and how they have generational talent every couple of years or so because of the fact that you have new ideas, new love, new fans, and a new wave of characters. Similar, the application here is the same thing, right? Where we look at that and we understand that when you have new generations of characters, those are always going to be the ones that people want to celebrate versus, say, the ones down here, which are always going to be the derivative versions of that particular era's characters. So when we talk about the Whitman Paradox and we think about how this character came out in the late 60s, we definitely have to understand now that when we look at the swag system and we're thinking about getting money for our return on our investment when the characters that we're trying to spec on, and we're thinking that we are a key collector Kevin and we're going to be going to the moon with our investment in the Black Knight, well, we have to ask ourselves the question, when we get Black Knight in the MCU, has that fandom, has that standom, has the huddle diamond hand collectors actually been created for this character? Is there a precedent of collectors who constantly buy the ongoing series for the Black Knight? Is there a precedent of fans and collectors who constantly pick the Black Knight in the Marvel video game? Is there a precedent of the Black Knight being utilized in pop culture that is going to showcase or demonstrate that when he actually is on the silver screen, there's going to be people that actually want to own and hold his book, not just flip his book to the moon, which is why you have to understand the Whitman Paradox. It is a paradox, and you have to be very careful in understanding the years in which matter for every single generation. You can see that every single silver, bronze, copper, modern generation has a era of characters that really were beloved by those particular collectors, and those particular windows are the most important characters to collect and the safest ones to collect, because even when you decide to sell your book and to flip it into the market, you're always going to have enough holders that are willing to hold the book. Therefore, they will not be creating the Whitman Paradox.